When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about Euron in the book and in the show. I really want to talk about how HBO, and specifically D&D, adapted the character of Euron. And we're going to kind of go through his introduction in the King's Moot in both the show and in the books, because they're distinctively handled very differently. Just from every sense of the word of creating a character, the show fails to bring to life one of the best villains that is being groomed to be the big bad, it seems like, in the next two books, A Song of Ice and Fire. But before we get further into it, I want to say a thank you to my Patreons and members. If you did want to become one, you do get videos early, and you will be getting some exclusive content moving forward with House of the Dragon and all that coming up. But let's get into the video. So let's look at Euron in the show. Now, I'm going to play a clip here so you guys can kind of get a little bit of the sense of what we got in the show at the introduction of this character in Season 6. Obviously, I can't play the whole thing because of copyright, but let's talk about it.
Heard you managed to fuck things right into the ground. Captured a castle you couldn't keep. Got yourself taken prisoner. Even heard you have no cock.
So the first thing we really see from the character of Euron in the show is he doesn't give off this presence of being an evil or a mysterious or a character that we should fear, right? He comes off as a character that's making jokes about cocks.
Gallivanting. That's the sort of thing you start to say once your dick gets chopped off.
And stuff like that. It's very childish humor, right? And so what does it do? It lessens the threat level of a character like Euron. It kind of weakens the character because his dialogue is so poorly written in the show. Now, if we compare that to the books. So the books, the key part about Euron is that we get build up to the character before we actually meet the character. So in the books, we have all this set up through with Euron Damphair, with Asha, and also with Victarion, right? All of these characters give us different opinions and or interactions that they've had with the character of Euron. So we have this preconceived version of who Euron is. We even get introduced into him before the King's Moot. It's very brief, but it kind of paints the idea of the relationship between characters like Victarion and Euron. And so we see this character of Euron being very mysterious before we even get to introduction to him. He's someone that seems to have had a brutal past with Victarion. He is someone that seems like he may have killed his brother in Balon. He was exiled for a long time. There's rumors of him having sorcerers and these mutes on his ships. It's very interesting the way that the books introduce the character before we get to him actually having his big moment. And so let's look at the show. The show, we get almost none of this. Right away, the mystery of the character is taken out right away, right? The character is shown on screen of killing Balon. And so it takes away that mystery, like that intrigue of what happened. In the books, it's more like, oh, did, he send a faceless man after him? Did he? There's just more intrigue. There's more mystery built there of the character of Euron. Whereas in the show, they take that away, right? This character doesn't come off as very mysterious. So we see that part of it. We see a little bit of like Theon and Asha talking about Euron, and that's it. There's no build up to the character of Euron, who should be this big bad heading into the end of the show, right? And it kind of should have been like this. It should have been Joffrey for the early seasons. It should have been Ramsay taking over, and then from Ramsay, it should have been to Euron, right? It was kind of a natural trajectory. We introduce Euron right as Ramsay is going to die in that season. So the issue then kind of comes from there's no build up to the character, so that in the book, him becoming this big presence is more built up to. Whereas in the show, it's not. And it's the same way. The show does the same thing with Ramsay, right? Ramsay is not this main villain. He is someone that comes in and slowly introduces as being the main villain. Whereas in the show with Euron, they just tried to throw him in there and they thought it would just land. And it just didn't. It fell very flat. So I showed you already some of the stuff from the show, the way they introduced Euron. Euron comes in as just being, I just make fun of Theon for not having a cock and all of this, and he just kind of wins and nobody really says anything. There's no real like debating going on. There's no Euron's very clever. It's just he's gonna give Daenerys his cock as well. Like the dialogue is what kills the scene, as well as Euron's appearance. Euron's appearance is very different in terms of the book to the show, and there's a lot of visual storytelling that we can get from Euron's, the way he's described in the book compared to the show. In the show, he just looks like He looks like every other Ironborn. There's nothing that distinguishes him as a character, because they've kind of stripped him of that. In the book, he has things like Valyrian armor, and he has this look about him where his eyes are different. At times you see the smiling eye, and the other time you see the crow's eye, and things like that. It's very interesting the way Euron is described as a character visually. That's just not present whatsoever within the show. And so Euron in the book, when he's introduced, he goes last at this Kingsmoot. He does this because he's taking in the arguments of the people. He's a politician. He's this mastermind that's understanding, how do I manipulate a public? How do I manipulate these people? Right? We see in Feast for Crows one of the best chapters of the entire series, not just Feast for Crows. It is the best one in that book, but we see Asha give her claim and trying to be more progressive. We should trade and we should build alliances with the North and the kingdoms and stop doing the reaving and stuff. And we see Victarion play the opposite, play Balon's role, where we should continue the war effort, continue the old way. And then comes in Euron. And Euron plays and he manipulates the public so well because he takes a middle ground, right? He plays on what the people want to hear, right? He promises them Westeros. He promises them Daenerys. He promises them all these things. And he has this mysterious dragon horn that seems to have come from maybe Valyria. He's this figure that plays on what they want to hear, having the most experience in terms of going around the world and these things. And so Euron brilliantly plays the people. He's a master manipulator. We don't see that in the show at all. In the show, it doesn't really actually make any sense as to why Euron is just made the king. It doesn't make any sense. He doesn't have Dragonbinder in the show. He has nothing to back up any of his claims outside of that he has a big cock. You see why, in terms of the character, falls flat? Because there's no mystery to the character of Euron Greyjoy. There's no, intensity to the character in the show. He's just kind of a joke in the show. Whereas in the books, he's a very dark character, right? He is someone that seems like he could have been sexually harassing or assaulting his brother Euron. He is someone that went into exile for quite a bit of time, and who knows what he was doing. He seems to have blue on his lips. We know that Euron is taking the shade of the evening, showing him visions and things. And Euron even is hinting at almost awakening krakens and causing an apocalypse. Think about all of that intrigue that I just told you with Euron and why he should be considered such this massive powerhouse. And what is one of the main things that seems to be missing in the later seasons? A real threat, right? The White Walkers seemed like they were a big threat, but that went nowhere, and Cersei herself didn't have much to do in the later seasons of Game of Thrones. Euron was the character that should have taken the mantle, and it's very clear to see from the outset, D&D didn't understand the character of Euron Greyjoy. He's vastly different. And with just a couple differences, we have a completely different character. In terms of the appearance, they failed Euron. In terms of his dialogue, his amazing monologue that they completely butchered in the show. All these things are adding up to a different character. And that's one of the key things about Season 6 that I really dislike, and about the show as a whole. They really screwed up a lot of those Feast for Crows and Dance Dragons plot lines. And Euron Greyjoy as a whole, one of the most intriguing characters, was caught in the crossfire. So thank you guys for watching, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on Euron Greyjoy and his handling in the show as well as the book, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.